A catastrophic ceiling collapse leads to a slew of problems for a tenant living in an apartment complex in Watervliet. For several months, he was without a home, and he is still deep in debt. 13 Investigates Tessa Bentulin shares part 1 of her report tonight.
There are hundreds of thousands of renters in the capital region. Most likely, those renters are not dealing with this. So what do you when a disaster like this one happens? Through Brandon Gazer's story, you will learn a few tips on your rights as a tenant.
In July, Brandon Gazer got an email stating his roof was going to be replaced on his unit at Lakeshore Park Apartments in Watervliet. Little did he know this would happen. The roof collapsed into his living room and dining room, damaging thousands of dollars worth of valuable belongings he's bought over the years.
Everything from the big screen TVs to the very expensive leather couches to this, my beautiful oak desk, my fish tank that I've been cultivating for, almost 3 years now.
How did a roof repair turn so terrible? 13 Investigates learned Lakeshore Park Apartments hired Babe Roof to get the job done. The company is based out of Long Island. Babe Roof declined to comment for the story, but Gazer recalls what he saw.
And I had noticed that there were people on the roof, and they were pulling the shingles off of the roof because they were attempting to replace it. I could hear the banging, I could hear all of the pulling of nails and the removing of the wood, and it turned into daylight pouring into my apartment. So I looked up and I realized and could hear the cracking of the sheetrock and realized that sunlight was pouring in.
Then 2 storms rolled in.
I had to take pots and pans and place them, all around the apartment to try to capture as much water that was coming in as possible. But no matter what I did, I was unable to really get it.
And this is where Gazer says his problems get worse. His renter's insurance denies his claim, stating this type of loss is not covered under his policy. Then he files a complaint with the Attorney General's office. But the state says they don't represent individual tenants or provide this type of legal advice. And don't forget, Gazer still does not have a home at this point.
I've been in hotels, I've been in motels, I have stayed in my car, I've slept at the airport, I've slept in the mall, like in the mall parking lot. I have stayed with friends on their couch.
Meanwhile, many emails between Gazer and Lakeshore Park Apartments' parent company, Eagle Rock Management, detailed the next steps to fix this eyesore. With each email sent, the problem gets bigger. 13 Investigates asked an attorney who specializes in these types of claims about this situation. He says it's complicated.
This is an unusual circumstance. This was, I don't want to say an act of God, but...
Lakeshore Park Apartments and Eagle Rock Management declined to comment on this story. In part 2, I'll explain what the apartment complex found that kept Gazer out of his home for even longer. For 13 Investigates, I'm Tessa Bentulin.
At 6 o'clock, we showed you this nasty roof collapse in a man's apartment in Watervliet. Brandon Gazer first contacted 13 Investigates over the summer, shortly after this nightmare happened to him. Once our Tessa Bentulin started looking into it, she found the problems continue.
The ceiling collapse created a dangerous situation. Brandon Gazer no longer had full access of his apartment in Watervliet, and the management company wanted to make sure nobody got hurt. An attorney who handles these types of situations shares how this problem is tricky to take care of. If you're a renter, we have some tips for you at the end of this story.
3 days after Brandon Gazer's roof collapsed, he learned the locks were changed on his unit at Lakeshore Park Apartments. No one is allowed to get in without being escorted. Gazer says all of his belongings he spent thousands of dollars on are collecting dust and other debris.
You don't realize how much those things mean to you or how much they matter until you no longer have them.
The management company, Eagle Rock, says locks were changed for life safety reasons. 13 Investigates asked an attorney if this is allowed on a unit without prior notice.
Normally, you would not be able to unless you went to court and got an eviction order. But this is a different situation. This is a situation where the apartment is dangerous because the ceiling has fallen in.
Eugene Welsh works for Tully Rinke Law Firm. He has worked on many similar cases. Welsh sees Gazer's problem as an act of God moment.
In lots of leases, what's known as a force majeure, it's a Latin term that says that if there's a calamity that happens that makes living in the apartment impossible, then you don't have to pay rent and they don't have to let you stay in that place because it's not safe.
In Gazer's lease, 13 Investigates found a force majeure clause. Eagle Rock Management then gave Gazer two options. Number one, he can end his lease and receive any rent paid since the roof collapsed on July 16th. Number two, Gazer can keep his unit while it's being repaired, but he will need to remove all of his belongings to avoid the risk of any more damage being done. Gazer chose option two. He says partly because his rent is under $1,000.
I was comfortable.
Soon after deciding to keep his apartment, Gazer learns in an email from Eagle Rock Management that his unit tested positive for asbestos.
We all look forward to getting back to our beds. We all look forward to having our own couch and, like getting into our own environment. And, when a week turns into 2, turns into 3, turns into 5, turns into 8, turns into 10. And it's just, the days, they go so slow.
Gazer says he realizes he won't move back into his apartment he's called home for 4 years. Now he's taking the apartment complex to court to try and receive compensation for much of his deeply damaged property. Lakeshore Park Apartments and Eagle Rock Management declined to comment. 13 Investigates did obtain a copy of this letter the apartment complex attorney sent to Colony Town Court. It details their safety concerns of letting people into Gazer's unit, also noting the 4 different insurance adjusters who did inspections.
I don't think they knew the seriousness of what had happened until they discovered the asbestos, and that changed the whole circumstances that the landlord was dealing with. And it's going to take a while to get rid of the asbestos and do it properly so nobody gets sick.
In the end, Gazer's lease was terminated because of the roof collapse and the damage. He also received his security deposit back.
In the last few weeks, Gazer has moved into a new apartment elsewhere in the capital region, but he says he still has not received any compensation for his damaged belongings. Now, if you're a renter, these are some rights you should know. Number 1, you have the right to a safe premises. Number 2, you have the right to sue to recover some damages. Number 3, you don't have to pay for your rent during most emergency situations. And number 4, read your entire lease agreement. Your rights should be spelled out for you. For 13 Investigates, I'm Tessa Bentulin.